It is so interesting. It has been all of 30 years that I have been learning from and with Italian media educators, getting to visit your summer school, engaged in the exchange of ideas, and now through Maria's wonderful leadership of the Journal of Media Literacy Education, I feel very honored and very grateful to be invited here to be the keynote speaker for today. Let me share my screen and start my presentation. I am excited for you to confront this question right away. Let's confront this question. What does the Squid Game, Netflix's Korean drama, what does it have in common with Swedish environmental activist Greta Thunberg? Think it over. Perhaps you have an idea and you will put that idea in the chat. What does Squid Game and Greta Thunberg, what is the relationship between these cultural phenomena? Well, I would suggest to you that they exist on the dystopia-utopia continuum, right? When we understand storytelling about societies, we appreciate that there's a continuum. And in my opinion, it looks something like this. We have ideas about how society works. And of course, we get those ideas from information. We get those ideas from social norms and social interaction and the nature of human communication, and from our own emotions and experiences. These days, you must place yourself on the dystopia-utopia continuum. Are you here at the far left side, deeply appreciating how institutional systems are corrupt and anti-democratic? Or are you here, firmly committed to the idea that institutional systems can be reformed? Well, if you're like me, you might start out in the morning reading the newspaper and think, it's impossible. Institutional systems are inherently flawed and impossible. It's just, these things are not working. Our healthcare is not working. Our political system is not working. Our law and justice is not working. You can just go down the list if you read the newspaper in the morning. But then certain things, other things might happen, certain other encounters you might have that leave you feeling a little more hopeful, wondering if perhaps humans can intervene in these systems to reform them. So many times a day, I might toggle between dystopia and utopia. And of course, these days, I'm far more on the dystopia side, almost all the time. One of the reasons why is the presence of fear. We have a lot of fears, don't we? We have COVID fears, we have political fears, we have worries about populism, we have worries about immigration, we have worries, we have fears and worries and more fears and more worries. And fear cultivates mistrust and alienation. But as Ethan Zuckerman says in his wonderful book called Mistrust, fear does cultivate mistrust and it does cultivate alienation, but it also cultivates activism. And so I want to reflect a little bit on what it means to teach controversial issues in a society where many of our students and even ourselves are feeling increasingly pessimistic about the capacity of humans to reshape their social, cultural, and political institutions. To address issues like what rights do people have to self-expression and what are the limits Should students be able to use their mobile phones in school? How should our nation respond to the needs of migrants and immigrants? How do we reduce racism and inequality? How should the internet be regulated? And how do I control who uses my data? These are just some of the many questions that are swirling around the world that media educators inhabit. And of course, they organize nicely into the framework provided by the Council of Europe, which positions digital citizenship in relation to these three broad spheres. I really love this model because I love how holistic it is. It situates media and information literacy in a larger context, redefining digital citizenship to include active participation, consumer awareness, and thinking about us not just as digital citizens, but as whole human beings by addressing health and well-being, ethics, and empathy. So, what's all this stuff about controversial issues in the classroom? This is from just a few days ago. School boards around the country are under fire. What exactly do they do? As the controversy stirred up by the conservatives in the United States over something they call critical race theory, a theoretical idea that somehow is so scary, somehow is so dangerous that children cannot even learn about it. This is creating quite a lot of anxiety and conflict. I recently got a phone call from a PhD student in Florida who said, "You don't know what it's like to be here in Florida, right? I'm not sure if I can pursue my doctoral research because the pressure around me is so intense. Perhaps the administrators of my university will close down the teacher education program." That's how angry they are that we want to teach about social justice in teacher education. Oh my. In the UK, I had threats to my life, how mob attacks on social media are silencing UK teachers. So there's a British offshoot of a Trump supporting network that's targeting educators who express their political ideas on social media. Whew. Now think how intimidating that could be to a teacher, young or old, who encounters the kind of hate that's personally directed through their social media networks. And here in Italy, there's been a little bit of controversy about how race is represented in media. And I've been reading about the Cambirai dialogue to address racist discourse in Italian television. So we have to think about the consequences of this increasing controversy. And Kylene Beers wrote an essay a few weeks ago called "A Curriculum of Irrelevancy," where she suggests we consider the consequences. She writes, "If we banish from our minds, our libraries, and our classrooms any examination of politics, religion, race, environment, sex, justice, and the like, we might protect ourselves from the possible discomfort we might experience. All we have to do is trivialize the curriculum to the point that few will be bothered by anything. If we can make instruction completely insignificant, utterly irrelevant to anyone's emotional and intellectual life, then absolutely no one should rise up to protest the threat we pose to treasured beliefs, valued affirmations, or well-established habits of thought and action." This is a time, an opportunity for deep reflection. How much of my curriculum, what I teach to my students, is insignificant, irrelevant, and something that would never challenge treasured beliefs, valued affirmations, and well-established habits of thought and action. In what ways have I contributed to trivializing the curriculum by avoiding and sidestepping the most problematic issues faced in our field? For example, in my country, the reliance on high stakes testing as the sole and utter measurement of the worth of public education. Too many of us accept those realities without question. And in a way, those are we need to think about those issues as controversial issues as well. So I submit to you that media literacy educators, and maybe all educators, must specialize in teaching the controversies. But what does that mean, to specialize in teaching the controversies? Well, first we have to acknowledge the dynamic nature of controversy. Controversy is not static. In fact, the best way to discover this is to have an intergenerational discussion with a grandparent. When asking them, when you were growing up, what were some topics that were not at that time considered controversial, but today would be considered controversial? When I was growing up, the topic of immigration was not controversial. We were, after all, children of immigrants from Italy and Poland and Lithuania, and my family had a proud tradition of seeing their immigrant heritage as essentially the foundational idea of America. Now, 50 years later, immigration is a very controversial topic, and many people in our country think we should close the doors, right? Not let anybody else in. It wasn't controversial when I was growing up, but it's controversial today. But now think about how many issues at one time were controversial and now are not, or were controversial then. It's fascinating, isn't it? All of these topics have shifted over time, moving from being controversial or not controversial, and especially this one, vaccines. Let's take a look.
A bag full of bogus information is showing up on doorsteps in the state.
Oh, let me check to make sure. Can you, I don't know if you can hear. I'm worried that you can you hear me? Can you hear the
Sarah,
yes?
thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Lauren Traeger. News 4 spent the day working to find out exactly who is behind the anti-vaccination flyers. Alexis Sotos has more on that, plus why local health officials are so concerned about vaccine misinformation.
This is more down the rabbit hole, I guess we could say.
Eric Turmal woke up this morning to a bag on his porch. So did many of his neighbors in Grand Center.
Just disappointing conspiracy theories and misleading information and fear mongering to just pass out to a bunch of people.
It included anti-vax flyers with images and quotes like vaccines equal poison, a vegan starter guide, a DVD, and a business card for a quote certified health practitioner.
I am
Okay, you got the concept, right? Or here's another example.
Hey, it's me. I'm finally going to get my vaccine. I'm so excited. I've been waiting a while. I'm old enough to get it, and I'm smart enough to get it. So I'm very happy that I'm going to get my Moderna shot today. And I wanted to tell everybody that you should get out there and do it too. I even changed one of my songs to fit the occasion. It goes, vaccine, 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 vaccine. I'm begging of you, please don't hesitate. Vaccine, 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 vaccine. Because once you're dead, then that's a bit too late. I know I'm trying to be funny now, but I'm dead serious about the vaccine. I think we all want to.
Okay, you get the concept, right? Two different ways to think about propaganda. Propaganda appears in a variety of forms. It's strategic and intentional. It influences attitudes, opinions, and behaviors. It can be beneficial or harmful. It might use truth, half-truths, or lies. But propaganda requires us. It doesn't work automatically. It works when it taps into our deepest values, fears, hopes, and dreams. Propaganda uses any means to accomplish its goal. In a way, the best way to think about teaching controversial issues is to explore the topic of propaganda. But propaganda and other persuasive genres are rarely examined or analyzed in schools, even though new forms of persuasive technologies aim to influence emotions, attitudes, and beliefs without awareness. I mean, this is the topic of my book, Mind Over Media, and I feel like we have to deepen our commitment to restore the teaching of the persuasive genres. If we think about it, just the scale of persuasive genres as a sector of our economy is noteworthy. Global spending on advertising was $749 billion. Half of that is controlled by just a tiny handful of gigantic digital platforms, raising the specter of monopoly. And new forms of persuasion include not just product placement, influencers, personalized advertising, nudging. You Italians are famous for your interest in measuring the kind of persuasion called nudging. Sponsored content, geolocation targeting, and dark patterns. So these are forms of persuasion that we may or may not even be aware are affecting us. Now, Diana Hess in the United States has done a lot of work on teaching the controversies, and she identifies that we can think of controversies in two different ways, not just as in relation to dystopia and utopia, but also questions that are settled or questions that are open, reflecting this idea that controversy is dynamic. There are settled issues where there's broad-based agreement and we don't have a controversy. And then there's open issues that are matter of live and current controversy in the public sphere. This means that the exploration of controversial issues is always situational and contextual. Here in the United States, the question of abortion rights was a settled issue since the 1970s. But recently, because of the arrival of a new Supreme Court justice on our court, it has suddenly become a controversial issue and potentially one that will be disrupted in the coming months. So the dynamic nature of controversy means we have to be sensitive to the fact that controversies can be settled and open, and that dynamism moving between them is important to recognize. And after all, propaganda is the main agent by which settled issues become controversial, because propaganda is used to disrupt social consensus, turning something that's settled into a controversial issue. But propaganda at the same time is also used to develop social consensus, helping open controversies become settled. And that is the reason why I say that propaganda is both the cause and the cure, because it can function both to disrupt social consensus and restore it. Now, here in our country, we are experiencing the most politically divisive climate since our Civil War. And many Europeans don't know that the American Civil War took the lives of over 600,000 soldiers. So we have reasons to be concerned about the growing political controversy in our country.
In case you didn't know it, Joe Biden is the president of the United States in name only. Someone else is running the White House.
We're not going to take it anymore. I see a civil war coming.
The Trump revolution has just begun.
We renew our call for a fair and nonpartisan investigation into the death of Ashley Babbitt.
It's Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich. We've gotten a lot of calls, a lot of emails, but there's one thing people definitely want to see. They want to see more Chucks. So people, you want more Chucks? You got more Chucks.
We had 40,000 Brazilians come through the Yuma sector alone, headed for Connecticut, wearing designer clothes and Gucci bags.
Halloween has come early here because nothing on this rule bill says debt limit.
In this rule, I mean, I'll lend him my glasses. It says in the title, increase the public debt limit. I mean, I don't know how much clearer it could be. It's in the title.
Our culture today is trying to completely demasculate all of the young men in our culture. And so I'm telling you, all of you moms here, the people who I said were the most vicious in our movement, if you were raising a young man, please raise them to be a monster.
Vice President Kamala Harris, because that's still a thing, she hired these child paid actors to pretend to like her.
Let's just say Texas does get a vote in the future and votes for a Texit. Do you think other states would follow Texas out of the union? And how would Texas defend itself if it did break away? Would Texas have nuclear weapons?
I also want to invite Kim from
Okay, I can't take it anymore. That was just a set of clips from last week. That's the scope of propaganda in the last 7 days. So we have to really study and examine and put under the microscope how propaganda activates strong emotions and responds to audience needs and simplifies information and attacks opponents, because this form of discourse is now dominating all aspects of our political and social life, not just in the United States, but of course, around the world. So what do we do about it? Now, I want to point out that when I ask this question, what are some effective instructional methods of teaching the controversies? Many college professors tell me, oh, well, I share my opinion about political and social issues all the time. That's not teaching the controversies. Sharing your political opinion with your students is not teaching the controversies. What I want to talk about is pedagogical practices that model how to engage learners themselves in wrapping their heads around the political and social and cultural controversies of the days. And that distinction is very important, right? Because the pedagogical strategies, the instructional methods of teaching controversies generally do not involve standing from your podium and telling your students what you think about political issues of the day, okay? So let's talk about 4 pedagogies used to teach the controversies. There's discussion, where groups of students are randomly assigned to small groups to read about an issue, consider various policy proposals, come to a consensus, and present their ideas to others, right? There's debate, where small groups of students read about an issue and then form opposing teams, and the teams get time to prepare the argument, and each side delivers an argument, and then both sides go back and forth to discuss and exchange ideas, and the goal is to influence a jury or a panel who determine which team is the winner. These are 2 time-honored techniques of teaching controversial issues. Now, some important research on this topic shows that debate produces anxiety, while deliberation increases feelings of respect and self-esteem. So we have pretty good empirical evidence of some impact of this pedagogical strategy. And here's the research from McAvoy and McAvoy, just published in 2021. Can debate and deliberation reduce partisan divisions, from the Peabody Journal of Education? So this study clearly shows that deliberation supports consensus building and debate creates divisions in attitudes. Well, then there's close reading, right? A time-honored media literacy pedagogy where students work in small groups to examine a media text. They demonstrate their comprehension by explaining ideas in their own words. They identify information about the author and the purpose and analyze how language, image, and other techniques are used to attract attention or arouse emotion or convey values. And close reading helps learners recognize values, ideology, and point of view. These are fundamental literacy practices, especially for adolescent learners. And these are the close reading competencies need a lot of attention during the middle school and high school years. They are absolutely central. Of course, there are a lot of resources to explore this. We can read the cover of magazines to look at how the iconography and the visual imagery and the color and the font communicate all kinds of messages about the coronavirus, for example. And the Propaganda Mind Over Media website also has a gallery of resources to support close reading pedagogies. But I want to talk a little bit about the fourth pedagogy for teaching the controversies. That's the create to learn pedagogy of developing an advocacy campaign, where small groups of students learn about an issue and then develop a media campaign to promote a particular policy or action aimed at influencing a target audience, working in teams to identify desired attitude or behavior change. They might create a slogan, a logo, or other campaign materials. They might create a video, a meme, an infographic, or a podcast, and they put that stuff out into the world. They circulate those messages in their own social network. Of course, create to learn activities help learners visualize themselves as change agents. And that's what makes them that's what makes this pedagogy so important. I firmly believe that create to learn activities like this should happen inside every class. It can happen in a small way for just one part of the class. It can be a major part of the class, but it's not something that happens one and done. You need practice, right? You need to exercise this muscle. You need repeated opportunities to visualize yourself as a change agent, and create to learn activities are great for that. Of course, they also develop all these other competencies that we value, like collaboration and creativity. They connect the home and the school, promote metacognition, use inquiry pedagogies, and position the teacher and the learner as working together in a co-learning process. Let me show you an example of this from Hilo High School in Hawaii. I'm going to just fast forward here
to conditioning / hitting practice.
This is a high school
sports, which starts this week.
A high school
Boys,
video
Monday,
that airs
Wednesday,
every day
Friday, 3:30 p.m.
to the students
Tuesday,
of the high school.
4:30 p.m. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 4 o'clock p.m. Physicals and COVID vaccine cards are needed to participate. Any questions, see Coach Leanne in F building. Before we go to Joseph for what's new, here's a PSA from the Hilo High Pride Empowerment Club.
October is an LGBTQ History Month, and the Hilo High Pride Empowerment Club presents this History Minute. Throughout history, gay, lesbian, and transgender people have been mistreated and criminalized. On June 28, 1969, New York City police raided the Stonewall Inn, a gay club where people sought a safe place to socialize. The police roughed up the patrons and neighborhood residents, who then fought back. Riots and violent clashes between the LGBTQ community and the New York City police went on for 6 days as people fought for their rights to gather. The Stonewall riots was an important moment in LGBTQ history because what happened set off a revolution all across the United States to change discriminatory laws and practices against LGBTQ persons. This month, think how you can be kinder and spread positive vibes. Let's make Hilo High a safe place for all. Mahalo from the Pride Empowerment Club.
Attention all.
Oh my God, that is so adorable. 1 minute. This student made a 1 minute slideshow, but wow, she reached her entire community. And what a great example of a create to learn campaign. Now, analyzing social movements, as she did, reveals how propaganda is used to disrupt laws and policies that oppress or marginalize human dignity and freedom. And creating propaganda helps students learn how to develop social consensus by using the power of communication in socially responsible ways. So again, we see the potential to learn to critically analyze propaganda that is a form of social activism, and participate in creating propaganda that helps express a cause or a position that helps to create social consensus. To do this, then, we have to think about how these pedagogies help to replace fear with intellectual curiosity. How these pedagogies can enable us to show students not to be afraid of divergent and even competing ideologies. And when we can do that, then we can reform institutional systems through activism. But of course, to do that, we have to consider our own positionality and reflect on the stances that we have as civic actors. So I invite you to reflect, how are you using the 4 instructional practices to teach controversial issues? Take the plunge. Try to use all 4 of them in the semester that follows. Don't be afraid. It's only through our fearlessness and our courage and our commitment that we can move from dystopia to utopia. Thank you very much.